People say family dinner is where bonds are made. But for me, it was the trap, where my own son laughed in my face, poured the wine, then quietly locked the door, took away the keys and the phone, giving his accomplices enough time to break open the safe in the basement. The pain was not in the pry marks on the metal. It was that the betrayer wore my own Jennings name. Before I go on, do one thing for me. Hit subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because each click of yours does more than give me strength to expose the truth many would rather keep hidden. I spent nearly 40 years of my life as an insurance appraiser. That job taught me one thing: never trust something just because it looks perfect. A clean file, a smooth smile, a story that fits every detail. Sometimes those are the most artful covers for deception. But I never expected that lesson to apply one day right in my own son's kitchen. Brandon and Eliza's walnut dining table was so polished that it reflected the chandelier above. I sat there cutting a piece of grilled meat Eliza had just set in front of me. The spices smelled strong, a touch sweet, but when I chewed, I only tasted dryness, maybe because my mind wasn't on the flavor. Eliza forced a smile and spoke softly. "How do you like it, Dad? I made the sauce the way you liked it back then." I nodded, not wanting to embarrass her, but the bitterness at the back of my tongue did not come from the dish. It came from Brandon's wide, fake smile, from the way his eyes glittered in a way I recognized, the look people I'd interviewed wore when they were fabricating stories to milk insurance money. While the family atmosphere grew strained, my vest pocket buzzed. The old ringtone sounded sharp in the quiet room. I looked at the screen. Mr. Caldwell. The 72-year-old neighbor rarely called at this hour. A former Navy man like Caldwell was not the sort to be easily rattled or talkative. I picked up. "Walter, are you at home?" His voice was low but trembling. I frowned. "No, I'm at my son's. What is it?" The silence on the other end was heavy as lead. Then Caldwell whispered, in a dry voice like a mooring line tightening around a cleat, "Then who is in your house right now?" A chill ran down my spine. The image that flashed in my head was immediate. The red brick house at 78 Willow Creek Road, the place my late wife and I had lived for 30 years. Every room held memories. And in the basement, the old Mosler safe, heavy as a block of concrete, still guarded all the money I had saved. The proceeds from selling the last parcel of the farm, plus the retirement money I refused to put in a bank. $60,000, hoarded from a lifetime of work. I gripped the phone. "Caldwell, be clear." "I see flashlight beams," he whispered, moving through rooms. "The living room, then the kitchen. Not your house lights, not reflections. I spent 20 years at sea, and I know what someone holding a light and rifling through looks like, I'm sure." For a moment, my heart beat louder than the clinking of cutlery on the table. I sprang to my feet. The chair screeched on the wooden floor. Eliza dropped her spoon in panic. Brandon burst into a loud laugh, the sound echoing, but it was too loud, too forced, the kind of laugh that hides something. "Dad, old man Caldwell always imagines things," Brandon said in a mocking tone. "Last time he swore someone swam across the James River at midnight. Turned out to be a seagull." I looked Brandon in the eye. Instead of humor, I saw a flash of vigilance, like someone caught but forcing himself to keep acting. I pressed the phone to my mouth. "Caldwell, call the police. Right now. And make sure you lock your doors tight." He answered, "Will do. I'll watch from the window." I hung up and put the phone in my pocket. Then I said plainly, "Someone's in your father's house." Eliza froze, her face paling. Her hands holding the fork visibly trembled. Brandon slammed his wineglass onto the table. The red liquid splashed like a streak of blood on the white tablecloth. "You really believe that?" he sneered, voice edged with irritation. "Just a tree shadow. Caldwell's blind." I put on my jacket, each movement slow but decisive. "I have to go home now." "No," Brandon growled. The word "no" hung in the room and thickened the air. I stopped, staring at the son I had raised for 38 years. In the flicker of candlelight, his face was no longer the boy who sat for hours in the garage watching me fix cars. He was a grown man, but his eyes were full of lies, like a client I had once caught fabricating claims. I suddenly understood. This dinner was not for healing. It was a play, and the only audience was me. Some memories, even those buried under layers of time, return vividly with a single trigger. When Caldwell whispered on the phone tonight, my mind immediately went back to the previous Friday night. The night Brandon barged into my house without knocking, eyes bloodshot and voice trembling in a way I will never forget. The door slammed against the wall, knocking my coffee cup off the table. It shattered into tiny shards on the tile floor. Brandon stood there gasping, his old worn leather jacket frayed at the shoulders, zipper jerking as his hand shook. "Dad," he croaked, voice hoarse, "I need money. 40,000 tonight." I sat motionless for a few seconds. 40 years as an insurance appraiser taught me to observe. His collar was rumpled, his eyes hollow with dark circles, his hands restless, all signs of a man pushed to the brink. I set my half-finished coffee down and kept my voice calm. 40,000? What's going on, Brandon? He began pacing the living room, his shoes thudding on the old wooden floor. A business deal went bad. I have to fix it. If I have the money, I'll sort it out. I swear. I narrowed my eyes. A business? Or gambling? Brandon stopped, his face flushing, then turned swiftly toward me, his broad shoulder blocking the way. None of your business. I just need the money. I know you have it. From selling the land at Willow Creek. His words felt like a blade twisting in me. Yes, I had sold the last parcel of the Jennings farm, 3 generations of my family's sweat, to secure a safe retirement. I never intended to waste a cent. I kept 60,000 in the safe down in the basement, out of reach of bank fluctuations. But no, not for a son who never learned responsibility. Brandon, I said, breathing deeply, you once came asking for 8,000 for poker debts, 12,000 for a racehorse, and you promised you would never do it again. Each time you said, this is the last time, and each time you broke that promise. Do you know what I see? A man of 38, still living off his father. Brandon's face flushed. He clenched his fist and slammed it down on the table so hard the salt and pepper toppled their lids. You think you're noble? Sitting on a pile of money while your son dies in the street? I stood, my eyes never leaving his. No, I think it's time you stand on your own 2 feet. I'm not going to protect you anymore. In that moment, I saw his eyes change. No more pleading, no more shame, but something cold, unfamiliar, as if I were looking at a completely different person. Brandon leaned close, his voice dropping low. You'll regret it, old man. The tone of those words made my skin crawl. It wasn't the complaint of a disappointed son. It was a threat, short and clear. I forced myself to keep my voice calm, though a storm churned inside. Son, this is no longer about money. This is about you destroying your own life. I can't save you from yourself. He jerked his head back, walked out, the door slamming so hard the frame rattled. Through the window, I watched his old pickup roar away, belching gray smoke down the dirt road to town. I sat in the living room, the lamp casting my shadow across the floor, my hands trembling as I lifted the shard of the broken coffee cup. In 38 years, I had never seen Brandon look at me with that expression, the look of a stranger. The rest of that weekend, I tried to reassure myself. Maybe it was just angry words. Maybe he would cool down and come back to apologize. But deep inside, I knew that threat was not idle talk. It was the beginning of a plan. I just hadn't imagined the plan would be cunning enough to draw me into a dinner like tonight. A staged performance to distract me, while my own house was turned into a target. And now, recalling every detail, I shiver. From the way Brandon kept glancing at his watch during dinner, to the forced smile, to Caldwell's call, Everything links into a harsh truth. That Friday night was not just a father-son quarrel. It was a declaration of war. After the night Brandon slammed the door, demanding 40,000 and spitting out that threat, my house sank into a strange silence. Not peace, but the stillness before a storm. I cleaned up the coffee cup shards, polished the wooden table scarred by his fist, but I knew the most important marks weren't on objects. They were in Brandon's eyes, in the words he had spoken. Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday passed with no word from him. No messages, no calls. I wondered if he was buried in a casino, or already in trouble with those business partners he spoke of. I decided that if he didn't appear in a few days, I would call Eliza and ask about him without revealing my worry. But I didn't have to wait. Tuesday morning, just as I finished brewing coffee and settled into my old armchair, the landline rang. The rotary bell shrilled, slicing the quiet like a knife. I picked up and heard Brandon's voice, different from the hoarse threat days earlier. "Dad, it's me. I'm sorry." I raised my eyebrows, hand tightening on the receiver. In nearly 40 years of fatherhood, not once had Brandon ever called just to say sorry. "I'm listening," I said, voice steady. The waves churned inside me. "I know I went too far the other night. I lost control. I shouldn't have said that. Dad, you were right. I can't keep leaning on you. I need to change." He laughed, but the laugh, crackling through the line, sounded rehearsed, like reading a script, not born of remorse. I stayed silent, letting him continue. "Eliza and I want to invite you to dinner. Wednesday, 6:30. Eliza will cook the beef stew with potatoes you like. Remember Christmas 2 years ago? You had 2 servings. I glanced at the shelf, where a photo of my late wife, Helen, sat. She'd been gone nearly 10 years. She used to believe family dinners could heal any rift. Brandon's mention of dinner pierced that memory like a needle. "Dinner?" I asked slowly. "Where?" "Our new house. 214 Hawthorne Drive, near the elementary school, the blue one with white shutters. You can't miss it. We moved last month. I must have forgotten to tell you. 6:30. I promise it'll be a warm evening. Our family needs this, right, Dad?" Oddly, he recited the address too quickly, too perfectly, without a single pause, as if reading it off a paper in front of him. Images rushed through my mind. Brandon's old house drowning in debt, the bank at his door. Now suddenly he'd moved into someplace new, nicer. Where did the money come from? "I'll consider it," I said flatly. "Dad," Brandon cut in, his voice suddenly pleading, "this is a chance. I want to start over. I know I let you down, but give me one night. I owe you that." The line clicked, and he hung up before I could answer. I sat frozen, listening to the wall clock tick, staring at the scrap of paper where I had scribbled the address. 214 Hawthorne Drive looked ordinary enough, but to me the numbers weighed like stone. Eliza was a good woman. She had often tried to steer Brandon, urged him to get steady work, to keep a home. Maybe she was behind this invitation. If so, refusing might slam shut the only door left between me and my son's family. Yet my professional instincts rang out. Apologies that flow too smoothly. Promises of change often mean performance, not truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, I remembered the last time Brandon was truly happy. A 12-year-old boy grinning wide beside the go-kart we built together in the garage. That memory haunted me, made me want to believe there was still hope for him. But then the threat, "You'll regret it," echoed again, a shadow that would not fade. The next morning, as I stepped out to get the paper, I froze. Parked across from my house was an old truck with Virginia plates. Inside sat a thin man, head bowed over the wheel. My heart tightened. That feeling, the one I used to get when uncovering fake claims in hundreds of cases, came rushing back. I didn't yet know what that truck and its driver had to do with me, but one thing was certain. The image would cling to me, and soon enough it would reveal its tie to Brandon. The instincts of a retired insurance appraiser may be old, but they have never failed me. 40 years in the job, examining every detail of a file, every flicker in a client's eyes, every faint trace on paper, had trained me. Whenever something doesn't fit, stop and pay attention. That morning, as I carried my coffee onto the porch, my eyes locked on the ash-gray truck parked by Mrs. Henderson's mailbox. It didn't belong here. Willow Creek was a quiet neighborhood where every car was familiar. Caldwell's old SUV, the Johnson family's beige minivan, the red sedan of the young nurse on the corner. But this truck, Virginia plates, mud still clinging under the chassis, was an intruder in the picture. Inside the cab, a middle-aged man slumped over the wheel. Now and then his fingers tapped nervously on the dashboard, his eyes sneaking around the street. That tapping. It wasn't the rhythm of someone waiting for an engine to warm up. It was the beat of someone anxious, tense, watching the clock. I set my coffee down on the wooden railing, strolled across the street, pretending to check the mailbox. As I passed, I tapped lightly on the glass. He flinched and spun around. "Car trouble?" I asked in that neighborly tone. "Ah, yes, sir." His voice cracked high and his eyes avoided mine. "Engine overheated. I'm letting it cool before I start it again." I peered through the glass. The truck bed was full of tools, wrenches, sockets, and an old drill. A real mechanic? Maybe. But why park right across from my house and stay all night? "I used to work on engines of all kinds," I said calmly. "If you like, I can. Have a look." No, thanks. My friend's coming soon." He gripped the wheel, his fingers trembled. I smiled and nodded. "Name's Walter Jennings, live right across. Knock if you need anything." His eyes brightened for a flicker when he heard my name, then slipped away quickly, like I had touched a memory he didn't want to revive. That wasn't the reaction of a stranger, but of someone who'd heard the name before. I stepped back and walked slowly toward my porch, but a question had already settled in me. Why did a strange man with a strange truck seem to recognize my name the instant he heard it? When I closed the door, Caldwell from across the yard called softly. "Walter, did you notice that truck?" "I did," I answered, "and I don't think it's just a broken-down vehicle." He nodded. "Old sailor's instinct tells me the same. He's looking at your house more than the engine." All day I watched from behind the curtains, cataloging every detail. Plate KJL 4729, how he bent over to jot something in a small notebook, the way he would lift his phone, dial, then hang up. Near noon, the truck left, but a big question remained in my head. Who was that man, and why was he more interested in the house with my safe than the truck's engine? When night fell, I pulled out the scrap where Brandon had written the address this morning, 214 Hawthorne Drive. A family dinner invitation right after a stranger sat outside my house all morning. Too many coincidences for comfort. I didn't know exactly what was being hatched, but one thing was certain. The chess game had begun, and I, the father who thought himself merely an audience, was likely about to become the main target in his own son's plan. On Wednesday afternoon, as the last sun filtered through the old oaks, I hung my dark navy vest out to air and smoothed it carefully. At 68, I rarely wear suits anymore, but tonight I chose the best one. Not because I trusted Brandon's reconciliation dinner, but from an old habit. When entering a room full of questions, I wanted to look steady so no one would think me easily deceived. I polished my black leather shoes, buffed them a third time until the lights gleamed. These preparations reminded me of appraisal days. Before each meeting, I checked every detail because a small slip could lose you the initiative. On the kitchen table, I placed the bottle of Cabernet I'd been saving, a gift for a special occasion. Maybe tonight I'd open it. But inside, I knew the bottle was also a test. If Brandon truly sought healing, he would raise his glass with sincerity. If this were a theater, I'd see it in how he held his glass and where his eyes wandered. As I tightened my tie, a light knock sounded on the porch. Caldwell stood there, cane in hand, with a polite smile but serious eyes. You going somewhere looking sharp, Walter? He asked, half teasing. Brandon invited me to dinner at his new place, I said, holding out the wine. Looks like he wants to make amends. Caldwell nodded, but couldn't hide the furrow of his brow. I hope you're right. But remember that truck from this morning. I don't like the way he was looking at your house. I remember, I said, tucking my sleeve. My instincts don't like it either. But refusing this dinner could close the last door between me and Brandon's family. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Then watch the details. You still have the head of an appraiser. Don't let fatherly feelings blind you. I nodded. Caldwell was right. I had written in hundreds of reports. No detail is too small when the truth is hidden behind a staged curtain. Driving to 214 Hawthorne Drive, I crossed the iron bridge over the James. The river glittered in the evening light, and a chill wind sighed through the glass. The scene was so peaceful that for a moment I wanted to believe tonight could be a genuine new start, that Brandon could change and our father-son bond might be salvaged. Hawthorne felt different from Willow Creek, new houses, trimmed lawns, luxury cars lining the curbs. I wondered how Brandon, buried in debt, could afford to move into a place like this. At number 214, I saw the blue house with white shutters, exactly as he'd said. Lights blazed from every window, a warm glow, yet to me it looked like a stage set. I sat in the car for a few seconds, watching. A silver sedan was parked out front, probably Eliza's, but someone's shadow crossed the living room window, moving slowly, deliberately, fading. I strained to see, but the shadow vanished as I focused. I stepped out, bottle in hand, and drew a deep breath. On the stoop, I thought of Helen. She used to say, "Never go into a family dinner with a closed heart, but never put your fork down and forget you can be stabbed in the back." The doorbell rang, and it opened almost immediately. Brandon stood there, smiling so wide it looked forced, gripping my hand like he hadn't seen me in ages. "Dad!" "Right on time, as always. I'm proud you keep that habit." I smiled faintly, but my eyes flicked to the hurried glance at his wristwatch. 6:30, exactly. Time mattered to tonight's plan. Eliza appeared behind him with a dish towel, smiling shakily while her eyes held something else, both relief that I'd come and worry at my presence. I handed her the wine, and she clutched it like a lifeline. "Thanks, Dad, that's so thoughtful. I'm really glad you came." The scent of beef stew and vanilla candles filled the air, but beneath the pleasant aromas, I tasted something bitter and hard to swallow. I stepped inside, and at that moment, my instinct warned me. I was not just entering a dinner. I was stepping into the center of a chessboard, where every chair, every candle, even every glance, had been prearranged. As I stepped into the dining room, it felt like I had just set foot on a stage. Everything gleamed unnaturally. The long table was draped in a spotless white cloth, porcelain plates lined up as if for a magazine spread, silverware glinting under the candles. The red roses in the crystal vase gave off a scent so strong it drowned the rich aroma of beef stew drifting from the kitchen. I had walked through hundreds of homes in my appraisal career, from opulent mansions to dingy apartments. Rarely had I seen a house too perfect in every detail, perfect to the point of looking staged. Brandon put an arm around me, his voice booming. "How do you like it? We tried to make everything just right. Eliza did it all. I only helped." Eliza lowered her face, her hands trembling as she carried the tray. "It's just a simple dinner. I hope you enjoy it, Dad." I smiled, but my eyes stayed on Brandon. He was lying, and I knew it. From the way he claimed he only helped when the faint scent of wood polish still lingered, it was clear he had been scrubbing and staging all day to hide something. We sat at the table. Brandon poured the wine with a motion that looked practiced, but his hand shook and drops of red splattered the cloth. He forced a laugh, wiping quickly. "I propose a toast," he said, voice straining for cheer, "to family, to second chances." I touched my glass to his, eyes never leaving his face. I had studied enough people in my life to know when someone was acting. Brandon sipped, then instantly flicked his eyes at his wristwatch, like a reflex. Conversation flowed as if rehearsed. Brandon recalled childhood memories, the go-kart we built in the garage, the time he broke the neighbor's window playing ball. Eliza chimed in with polite remarks, her forced smile unable to hide anxious eyes. It was a script, safe memories only, steering clear of debts or gambling. "I've changed, Dad," Brandon said, slicing his meat firmly. "I'm part of a new real estate project. Big opportunity. This time for sure." "What project?" I asked, my tone flat. He froze for half a second, then smiled. "Can't share details yet, but it's moving forward." I glanced at Eliza. She turned away, busying herself with dishes. Her knuckles whitened as she clutched the towel. As the main course was served, the heaviness deepened. Brandon chattered, but his eyes darted to the clock. 6:50, 6:55, almost 7. I sipped my wine, unease tightening inside me. Outside this bright house, something was happening, something that needed me to sit here long enough. When Eliza set down another dish, her hand brushed my shoulder, ever so lightly. But in that fleeting instant, her eyes flashed a plea. Then it was gone, replaced by her shaky smile. I understood. Eliza was not the architect of this charade. She was a witness, trapped, afraid like me. The dinner dragged on, but the truth sharpened. I was not a guest. I was the centerpiece of Brandon's stage play, and the real director was the watch on his wrist. The clink of silver on porcelain, the faint hiss of candles, it all became a tense soundtrack. Brandon was in mid-sentence about his real estate project when my phone rang. The shrill tone sliced the fragile air. I glanced at the screen. Caldwell. My chest tightened. The old Navy man never called at dinner unless it was urgent. "Go ahead, answer," Brandon said quickly, his grin stretched thin. "It's fine." But I saw his hand grip his glass hard. I raised the phone. "Caldwell, what is it?" His voice trembled but stayed firm. "Walter, are you at home right now?" I hesitated, glancing at Brandon and Eliza, both holding their breath. "No, I'm at my son's. Why?" A pause, then Caldwell's words dropped like a stone. "Then, who is in your house? I see flashlights moving from the living room up the stairs. Those aren't normal lights. Someone is searching." My heart thundered. At the table, Eliza's fork clattered onto her plate. Brandon dropped his knife, then laughed. Loud, false, echoing in the small room. "Old Caldwell's imagining again," he said, voice brittle, panic in his eyes. "Probably 3 shadows. He's always like that." I rose, pulling on my jacket. "No. I know Caldwell. He doesn't make mistakes like this." Brandon leapt up faster than I, blocking the door. "Dad, don't blow this up. The police will laugh if he calls." "Police?" I narrowed my eyes. "Why mention police before I even said it? Why, Brandon?" He froze half a second, long enough for me to catch Eliza's pale face, her eyes darting away, her hands twisting the tablecloth. I turned back to the phone. "Caldwell, call the police now. I'm coming." "Walter," his voice firm, "I won't leave the window until they arrive." I ended the call. Brandon stood blocking the door, sweat beading on his forehead. He smiled, but his voice rasped. "You're not going anywhere, Dad." Candlelight flickered over his eyes, not Brandon's eyes, the boy who once laughed over a go-kart in our garage, but cold, foreign eyes of a man trying to trap his own father in a dark game. He stood like a wall. I'd never seen him look at me like that. Trembling yet resolute, a beast cornered with no way out. "Sit down, Dad," he said, voice rough. "We'll talk after dinner. Don't make this worse." I narrowed my eyes, voice calm. "Make this worse? You just locked your father in your house while someone ransacks mine. This isn't dinner, Brandon. This is captivity." Eliza dropped the towel, her hands shaking. She opened her mouth, but Brandon shot her a glare that silenced her. "Why keep me here?" I asked, each word heavy. "Who is in the Willow Creek house? Why are you afraid I'll go there now?" Brandon swallowed, eyes darting to his watch. I saw him calculating. Finally, he hissed, You left me no choice. They want money, and I have to pay. If not, I'm finished. Pain struck my chest. So you dragged your own father into this pit? You hired men to break into my house? Eliza burst into tears. Walter, I'm sorry. I couldn't stop him. He said just this once, then it'd be over. Brandon snapped, Quiet, Eliza! Then to me, You don't understand. This isn't just gambling debt. These are people who never forgive. I had no choice. I stared hard at him. There's always a choice. You just chose the easiest. Selling out your father. The room thickened with silence. Outside, crickets sang, while in the candlelit room, only Brandon's ragged breath filled the air. I stepped back, steadying my voice. You're committing a crime, Brandon. You're not a child who made a mistake. This is a felony. You know that, don't you? Fear flickered in his eyes, quickly buried under aggression. He pulled a key from his pocket, snapped the lock shut with a sharp click, and shoved the key into his pants. You're not leaving. When it's done, we'll talk. For now, sit. I looked at my son, the 38-year-old man I had once held through fevers, once taught to swing a hammer in the garage, now standing there, locking me in as his captive. The sight cut deep and cold. I knew. This was no dinner. This was a prison, and Brandon was the warden. But I also knew. Every stage play has a flaw. And Brandon, already unraveling, was showing his. All I had to do was wait for the moment. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I need to use the bathroom. Just a few minutes. Brandon folded his arms across his chest, his gaze like a steel clamp. He didn't answer right away, just stared in silence as if weighing whether to let me go. At last he held out his hand. Fine, but give me your phone and car keys. I froze. What do you want? Don't play innocent, Dad. Why else would you call the police? I'm not that reckless. His voice trembled, but was full of resolve. Quietly, I took the phone and the key ring from my coat pocket and placed them in his hand. His fingers clenched fast, and then he slipped them into his pants pocket. In that instant, I saw it plainly. He had planned this. He knew a single slip would ruin everything. I walked to the end of the hall. The bathroom door creaked as I closed it. In the small space, under yellow light, with soap streaks still on the sink, I stood still for a few seconds to steady my breathing. No phone, no keys, no one on my side. All I had were these trembling hands and the survival instincts of nearly 7 decades. Then my eyes stopped at the window. The wooden frame was rotting, paint flaking, and the old latch looked untouched for decades. My heart pounded. This was the chance. I eased the latch. The tiny click sounded loud enough to stop my heart. I paused, listening. Outside, Brandon's footsteps still paced the living room. I pushed the window. It resisted, then gave. Night air. Rushed in, carrying damp earth and the scent of roses from the back garden. I drew a deep breath and climbed onto the sill. For a young man, this jump would be nothing. But for me, 68, it was a big gamble. I turned and slid my shoes out first. In that moment, a memory came back. Brandon at 12, perched on this same sill, hiding his first cigarette, thinking he was smarter than his father. I forgave him then. This time, I could not. I let myself drop. The landing was heavy. My knees flared with pain, but held. I rolled into the rose bed. Thorns tore my sleeve. I pressed flat to the ground, heart drumming. Inside, Brandon's voice rang out. Dad? Done yet? I held my breath. A few seconds later, a roar. Dad! Then a crash. Bang! The bathroom door kicked open. I heard feet pounding toward the front door. Eliza's voice burst out, panicked. Brandon, stop! What are you doing? Let go! He bellowed. But Eliza sobbed, clutching his arm, holding him back. You can't do this to your father. Their struggle thudded behind me. I didn't dare look back. I crawled low along the garden path, cut through the trees, and melted into the dark. At the lane to the highway, I finally stood, shaking from head to toe. No phone, no car keys. I stared helplessly at my sedan sitting in the driveway, only a few dozen yards away and utterly out of reach. I ran to the highway, where the sparse night traffic slid by. I raised my hand, stepping into the road, praying under my breath. Headlights washed over me. A dark blue truck braked hard right in front of me. The door swung open and a middle-aged man leaned out. "Old-timer, what are you doing in the road?" My voice shook. "Please, let me use your phone. My house, someone's breaking in. My son kept me from leaving." Surprise flashed in the driver's eyes, then hardened into resolve. He held out his cell at once. "Call. I'll take you back." My hands trembled as I dialed. 911. My voice caught as I gave the address and explained. The dispatcher confirmed, "A patrol unit is on the way." I exhaled, handed back the phone. The driver set a steady hand on my shoulder. "Get in. I'll take you all the way." The truck shuddered, tires humming over asphalt, carrying me back to Willow Creek. In the cab, the faint smells of old smoke and tar hung in the air. I stared ahead, a mix of loss and resolve swelling inside me. As we turned onto my street, red and blue lights were already pulsing across my house. My chest clenched. Every brick, every familiar window, now lay under the glare of a crime scene. The driver pulled over, solemn. "Come on, the police are here." I climbed down, my legs still weak, but a flame burned in me. The truth had begun to surface. Brandon thought he could cage me, could stage and seize. He forgot one thing. I've spent my life facing trouble. This time, I would not back down. Red and blue strobes washed over the brick walls, the murmur of radios threading through the heavy footfalls of officers. I stepped from the cab, both knees aching from the jump. The driver patted my shoulder, trying to steady me. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I knew I wasn't. "Thank you. Without you, I don't know where I'd be." On the porch, the police were unspooling yellow tape. Neighbors clustered, whispering. In the crowd, I spotted Caldwell, still in mud-streaked garden clothes, a big flashlight in hand. He saw me and hurried over, his face a mix of relief and worry. "Walter, thank God you're safe." He gripped my hand. I saw the beams inside, heard strange noises. I yelled, pounded on the door, and swept the light everywhere. He bolted right off, but I didn't dare go after him, in case he got violent. We went in with an officer. The sight tightened my chest. The living room ransacked, cushions slashed, drawers overturned. In the basement, my father's old safe stood scarred, its steel pitted with pry marks. Safe-cracking tools, crowbar, screwdrivers, even a small drill, were strewn across the concrete floor. Officer Miller, tall, even-voiced, looked at me. "Mr. Jennings, the intruder had plenty of time, but your neighbor's commotion spooked him into running. Luckily, your safe is intact." I squeezed my neighbor's hand, my voice rough. "Caldwell, you saved my life's work. Without you, that safe would be empty." I set a trembling palm on the cold steel, feeling each gouge. 3 generations had trusted this box to guard our labor. If it had opened tonight, I doubt anything would be left. Miller went on, "We don't yet have the suspect's ID. Neighbors saw him, but only in passing. Do you recall anything about the man you said you met a few days ago?" I closed my eyes. The image of the stranger in the odd truck flickered. Thinning hair, pale skin, shifty eyes. I nodded. "I remember. He lied about car trouble. I knew something was off." When I finished, Miller shut his notebook and exchanged a look with his partner. The house felt heavy. The only sound was his pen tapping the cover. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Jennings. We have enough to bring in Brandon Jennings for questioning. Please stay here. We'll take it from there." I watched the 2 officers leave and climb into the cruiser. The engine thrummed, and the light swung toward Hawthorne Drive. One beat pounded in my head. Now Brandon would have to face the truth. I stood on the porch, night wind slipping through my coat, watching the red and blue fade down the street. Somewhere in Hawthorne's dark, the police were knocking and calling my son's name. The next morning, I was summoned to the police station to give a formal statement. The small room, lit by harsh neon, cast a cold glare over the metal table. I recounted every detail, Brandon blocking me from leaving the dinner, forcing me to hand over my car keys and phone, and locking me in the bathroom. While I escaped through the window, he locked the front door, clearly intending to keep me there until his accomplice finished at my house. Miller nodded, taking notes carefully. Moments later, Brandon was led in. He sat across from me, his face twisted with resentment, though he tried to keep his voice calm. "You imagined it all, Dad. I only wanted you to stay for dinner. Stop obsessing. Making a scene like this is destroying the family." I clenched my fists, stared straight at him. "You locked me in. You knew someone was tearing through my house at that moment. How long will you keep lying?" Brandon smirked, shaking his head. "There's no proof. Just your word. I won't admit to anything." The air was taut as a wire. Then the door opened. Eliza stepped in, eyes red, clutching a damp handkerchief. She looked around, her gaze landing on her husband. After a pause, her voice broke. "Enough, Brandon. You were behind this. I can't stay silent anymore." Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. "These past days, I've seen Brandon meeting a rough-looking stranger in secret. Last night I saw him on the phone with him talking about timing and a job. I heard it clearly. He even mentioned the safe in Dad's house. The man's name is Otis." Brandon snapped his head around, shouting, "Eliza, you're insane. You're making this up to destroy me." Eliza met his gaze, eyes wet but burning. "No, Brandon, this is the truth. I've endured your cheating, debts, and lies, hoping you'd change. But when you plotted against your own father, I can't protect you anymore." The room thickened with silence. Brandon sneered. "She has no evidence, just words. You'd convict me on a woman's tears?" Miller stayed calm, tapping his pen. "The name just mentioned, Otis. We'll check it now." An officer pulled up records. Within minutes, a file appeared. Otis Raines, 3 prior theft convictions, 2 arrests for safecracking, currently out on probation. Miller's voice hardened. "The details match. We'll bring in Otis Raines and Mr. Jennings." He looked at me, then at Eliza. "Both of you will take part in the formal lineup." I nodded, gripping the table. Eliza let out a shaky breath, as if shedding a weight. Brandon slumped, face twisted. Even in despair, he muttered, "No, there's no proof tying me to him. I don't know Otis." But his denials now were only faint echoes in a room where truth had already broken through. 3 days later, I was called back to the station. Eliza and Caldwell came too. The corridor reeked of stale coffee and old files, every footstep sharp on the tile. Miller led us into the observation room. A one-way mirror split the space. Beyond it, 5 men stood in a line, their build similar, but among them was a face that froze my blood. Thin hair, pale skin, shifty eyes. The same man I'd seen in the strange truck. Caldwell nodded firmly. "No mistake. I remember him from that night he prowled the street." Miller noted, then turned to Eliza. "Mrs. Jennings, do you recognize anyone?" She swallowed, hands trembling, but her voice steady. "Yes. I saw Brandon meet this man several times in secret, and that night I heard Brandon on the phone, naming Otis, talking about his father's safe. It's him, no doubt." I added, "Or Otis Raines. He's the one I saw in the truck. He's the one who tried to crack my safe." 3 confirmations. Miller drew a hard line in his notes. "Enough for charges. Otis Raines, you're under arrest for unlawful entry and conspiracy to commit theft." At the sound of his name, Otis blanched. He stammered excuses, but the words fell flat. Months later, county courthouse. The chamber was packed. At the defendant's table, Otis bowed his head. The public defender urged him to plead guilty for leniency. And he did, admitting Brandon Jennings hired him, promising $5,000 to crack the safe. Brandon was placed in the dock. The prosecutor read the indictment, each count a hammer blow. Conspiracy to commit burglary, 5 to 10 years. False imprisonment, 2 years. Obstruction of justice, 3 years. Combined, the sentence requested 10 years in prison, no parole, plus 3 years supervised release. Otis, with his record, was sentenced to 6 years flat. Brandon, hearing the verdict, turned pale as paper. He looked to Eliza, searching for support, but she only bowed her head, never once meeting his eyes. The judge's gavel struck. Sentence is imposed. Court adjourned. I sat in the gallery, heart heavy. No joy, no triumph. Only deep pain, because the man before the bar was not just a defendant, but the son I had once held, once trusted. Yet in the final light pouring through the courtroom window, I knew justice had been done. Sometimes the harsh truth is the only way to salvage what remains of a family. Justice was served, and the price was a heavy sentence. But deep in a father's heart, I kept one small hope, that someday, after years behind bars, Brandon would understand the value of family and learn to rebuild his life. Because if we lose faith in change, all that's left is bitterness. If you too believe that even the most lost can find their way back, leave a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me for more stories, where justice is not only punishment, but a chance to rediscover who we are.